a uniquely gripping hybrid strategy game like no other, inspired by RTS, deck builders, and tabletop strategy games. Outwit your foes by efficiently constructing and commanding a powerful cybernetic army. A radical achievement in game design, Prismata rewrites the rules of strategy games. A bold statement by Lunarch Studios, but the game in question does stand up to all of those points. It is very radical in a sense that player, unlike in other card games, does not have to manage just one resource. For example, in Hearthstone it's mana. In Prismata you have to manage 5 resources. Another thing is that it's very different than in any other card game because you do not draw any cards. None at all. There's no randomness in Prismata. You have a pool of cards and you have a certain amount of each card that you can play in every match, right? Once you deplete that amount, you can no longer play any copies of that card. But so long as you have resources for that card and you have the copies, you do not have to draw. You just click the card on a panel and you place it on the board, and that's it. Another thing is that Prismata is very forgiving. Unlike card games like Hearthstone, unlike other card games like Hearthstone, where if you misclick, that's it, you're screwed. In Prismata, the game is very forgiving in a sense that you can revert your decisions in a turn. You cannot revert whole turns, but you can revert your decisions in a turn. For example, did you not want to play that minion? Or did you want to do something else with it? Sure, go ahead, so long as you didn't end your turn, and even then, the game will ask you twice if you really want to end your turn. You can go ahead, revert your decisions, and think your strategy through a bit more, or check twice before, clicking the end turn button. And the last thing that's worth mentioning is the game has a you have to pay up front to get the game. It costs 23 euros on Steam. But hold up, there are some microtransactions in the game, but their focus is not the card collection. You do not get any in-game advantage if you use the microtransactions. They're just there to get the game's soundtrack, to get some extra experience after you finish a match, etc, etc. But when it comes to the card collection, or as they're called in Prismata, unit blueprints, you get those when you earn experience and you advance to a new level. If I'm correct, whenever you advance to a new level, next level, you get a package with the cards that you just unlocked. And I think I haven't double checked, but I think it's linear. So there is no randomness even in that sense. You will get cards. If there is some wiki, I haven't checked, if there is some wiki where you can find the list of all cards and you check what cards you currently have unlocked, you know what you will unlock next when you level up. So that's about it for this short introduction. Maybe not so short, 3 minutes 43 seconds. It's not as short, but I would consider it shorter, or one of shorter introductions. And the rest of the video, there will be 4 other parts. There will be one about the resources, another one will be about the gameplay, and how do the resources fall into that category, or how they rather affect the gameplay, there. 4th part will be, hold up, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. 4th part will be, once again, about the collection, a bit more in-depth. And last part will be about my overall evaluation on the game, and the settings menu, etc, etc, just to finalize the video, there. So that's about it for the introduction, and let's get on to the next part. When it comes to the gameplay part, Prismata is very different from other card games. First of all, and that's also a feature that is, the main strong point of the game, there is no randomness, none at all. And because of that, the game is not for me. It's a shame, it's a good game, but I need a bit of randomness because I cannot plan ahead so much. You don't need to plan as much as I'm maybe stressing it out, but you certainly need to plan ahead of turns. You can't just plan your next turn, you have to plan 3, 4, even more turns ahead, because if you don't, and your opponent does, chances are your opponent has a great tactical advantage over you and over your side of the board, because they can influence what you have to build. If you, for example, if you have nothing to block the enemy's damage with, what do you do then? You can just take out all of your supply units and then you're screwed. But anyway, first thing that Prismata does differently gameplay-wise, right after the RNG, right, there is none, are resources. Now, every card game has, well, not every, sorry for that, majority of the card games have just one resource, and most of the time, that's mana. Now in here, there is no mana, although there is some sort of equivalent of mana, because as you can see, majority of those things have different requirements for the advanced resource, but all of them cost gold. So gold is your equivalent of mana, because you need it for everything. Even for construction of the units that basically produce you more gold. So you spend money to make money. Now those units are drones, right? One drone produces 1 gold when you click it. As for the other resources, all 3 of those, I wanted to say all 4, but then I realized that the 5th resource is produced by engineers, and engineers have no special requirements. They require only gold, so you need gold to produce engineers, you need engineers to produce electricity, and you need gold to make drones, and from there you can do anything. You can get the Gaussy, if I'm reading it correctly, which stores at the end of your turn, so that's very important to notice. You can get a Blast Forge, which earns you Bohemium, which is discarded at the end of your turn. You can get Animus, which produces Replicase, which is discarded at the end of your turn. And Energy is discarded as well. Now, what can you do with those things? Basically, if you want to produce any of the units which have a symbol of an advanced resource next to their name, you need either to store up enough of that resource, such as with the Gauss Fabricator. You need to have the conduit active for at least 4 turns, right? You can build more, but if you want just one, then you need to have it active for 4 turns, because remember, Gauss eats stores, and you need to gather 12 gold, and then you can build the Gauss Fabricator. However, if you want to build any of the other units, let's say a grenade mech, Blast Forge produces only 1 Bohemium. And remember, Bohemium discards at the end of a turn. So you need at least 2 Blast Forges and 10 gold to create a grenade mech. And as such, this unit is a lot more costly to get than the Gauss Fabricator. Arguably, I would say the Gauss Fabricator is much more powerful, but that is for a different story. Right now I just want to talk about resources. Now, this is not the complete collection. This is just a portion of the units you get to play with, and buildings and such. Because what I have here I have just some basic resource producers that require no additional resources, but there are some, and I'm not sure if I recall correctly, but there are some producers which require, for example, more gold or some different advanced resource, and in return, if you invest that into them, in return they produce not 1 type of resource, but 2 types of resource. Or for example, you can build an upgraded Blast Forge which will produce 2 Bohemium per turn, right? But those advanced builders, or I mean those advanced resource producers, have additional requirements. So those are your basic ones, and you can also see a pattern. Conduit is pretty cheap, because usually the things that, I might be mistaken, but I would want to think that things that you can create with Gaussy are more gold costly than they would cost the Gaussy, because the Gaussy stores at the end of the turn. Then you have a Blast Forge, which produces your regular It's mostly for defense and higher health units. And then you've got Animus, which is usually for very low health units, but they're very cost efficient in a sense that they're usually there to do damage. And most of the time, most of the time. From what I've experienced so far, it's the only thing they can do. Sure, there are some exceptions, like a Rhino. A Rhino can, for example, attack and block. But as such, I would want to think it's an exception, because it can attack only twice. It can block forever, right? So it's more like the Replica's units usually have just one task, whereas Bohemian units have multiple tasks, like Steel Splitter here is basically a wall, except you can choose to not block with it and you can choose to attack with it instead. But if you choose to not attack with it, you can block with it. As for the gameplay itself, the game is very player-friendly, because you can double-check if what you've done or what you're about to do is good for you, and if you have enough resources to do it, and etc, etc. Let me show you on a basic example, the most basic of ones I can think of. Alright, so you see that these are lit up in green, right? I mean, they have green borders. That means, whatever, they're just in a green frame, okay? If I click that, I get gold, right? It even says on the card, click, gain 1 gold, right? If, for some reason, I decide that I need that drone to block, because as you can see at the top of the drone card, it can also be used to block 1 point of damage, but doing so it will be destroyed, so this is not the most ideal of things to block with. If I need to block, and if at some point the enemy gets damage units, which they will, but right now I'm just here to test, to show how friendly the game is, you will be shown how much damage do you actually need to block, and it will take into account units that are gonna be ready on your opponent's turn but are not ready on your turn. It's very friendly, so if at some point I decide I need to block with that, I can just click, and there, it's undone. I can do that with anything until I click end turn and commit. End turn is like your first sort of saying yes, I know what I've done, or what I'm about to do, and I'm fine with it. And then commit is, the final yes. So here, let me go ahead and build 2 drones. Oh, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Yeah. See? It's very simple. See? Again, it asks me. I can stop and rewind everything that I've done and try something else. So that's how player-friendly it is. It's not like Hearthstone, where if you click onto a different card, you're screwed because that card didn't fit the situation. Now I got a small problem with the game. Because of its nature, because of the absence of RNG, randomness, and the need to plan, I can't play the game. Planning is my big weakness. Even in, when I'm away from the computer, when I'm at school or whatever, I cannot plan. So, it's more of just like my flaw. It's not a flaw of the game, but, the flaw is there, and it's just a flaw, that's what I want to say. There, so I will have to, oh, there we go, see? Now it shows how much health you have on your defenders, on your units that are available to block. Keep in mind, if you attack with something, or if you, click something to gain a resource or cause an effect, it will be unable to block because it already was exhausted doing that something. Whereas some of the units cannot be clicked at all, like resource producers cannot be clicked at all because they automatically produce, because that's the only thing they can do. Same goes for like the damage only things. So those will always be ready, right? Like the engineers, but the engineers are pretty valuable because they produce energy, because of which you can create more drones, or rather, with which you can create more drones. Now, in this situation, I will need a thing to block the enemy's attacks with, right? So I screwed up by not getting a blast forge, and I should have seen this coming because it's the same thing that I can build, and the Gauss cannon is pretty, I wouldn't say great, but I'm finding more liking in what is it called? The Gauss seed. Alright, so I would really want to get the Gauss fabricator, but if I want to survive, I will have to get a blast forge, lose a few engineers, and on the next turn get a wall, and then maybe get a Gauss fabricator. Which means that me building 3 conduits was pretty much a waste because I needed that extra money to be able to afford another blast forge. Because if I did on the previous turn, I would have 17 gold. I could have gotten a blast forge and a fabricator on this turn. And then I could have gotten, you know, like a wall, etc. on the next turn. Oh wait, because I'm playing against AI, I think I can get all the way back to the previous turn. No. I cannot, okay, but if you're playing in a campaign mode, you can go back for your turns and trace back and correct your mistakes if you find out that you did some. Right? In here you can't, because this is sort of like a playing against AI in, what is it, casual match? So you can do that over here, and you would also have a time limit, but I disable it for this occasion. You can do that, it's great. And as said, I can't really plan ahead of time, so I'm gonna get screwed. But that doesn't change much on... Actually, I can stop the... reverse the engineer's production in favor of a force field, which, when I buy it, it destroys 1 drone, but it can block immediately because, you know, when you buy something, it has to wait either a turn or 2, or sometimes I think even 3, before you can use it. Whereas, if it has a immediate prompt, it can block right away. Now the problem is that if something is fragile, it does not regenerate when it takes damage. Just like, you know, a wall would. Right, so here, the enemy has 2 attack. If I had a wall, the wall could absorb the 2 damage and then regenerate back to 3 health. But because I didn't get the blast forge earlier, I had to get a force field to not lose the engineers. And if I block with a force field, it will get destroyed completely because it has 2 health and there's 2 attack on the enemy side. But that's fine, I didn't lose any engineers, and if I were to be greedy I could get even more drones, but that's not what I'm gonna do. Alright. So here the enemy has 3 attack. I can get a wall and slow down his advance through my defenses, but I want to get the Gauss fabricator because the sooner I get it out the better. This basically creates 8 Gauss cannons. It has a lifespan of 8. That means this will stay on the board for 8 turns, and after that it's gonna destroy itself. But before that, it's gonna produce me 8 of those. So I pay 12 gold and 4 Gauss seed to get 48 gold back, right? 8 times 6, yes. And also save 8 Gauss seed. It's pretty good, isn't it? But here's another aspect which I didn't talk about. Because there is no RNG, you also have a limit on how many units of each type can you get. See that? See the blue bar? I mean light blue or turquoise, whatever. Click that, and that's it. I have only 1 charge of this card. Imagine if I could get 5 of those. That would be pretty nuts, wouldn't it? Then I could just build blockers and the fabricators would keep producing units. I would have a very, very cost efficient bunch of units available. Or rather bunch of unit producing units available. That would be pretty nuts. So you have a limit on how many units of each type can you get. Now that might be problematic, but it's not that much of a problem because, you know, there's, just like there are resource producers, there are unit producers. You see, here's a blast forge. There are upgraded blast forges. There's one that allows you to get more bohemium. It produces more bohemium. There's another type of forge that when you click it and pay 1 gold and 2 bohemium, it consumes a drone, or rather destroys it, and changes it into this steel splitter. So you basically save up about, I don't know how much, is that 5 gold? 5 gold whenever you click the forge, and you don't waste any charges of the steel splitter, rather of the drones, and you see how many more charges of the drones do you have than the steel splitters. So these charges are there to sort of limit your playstyle, but they can be cheated. Alright? Not always, because as you can see, I don't have the forge this time. Although I have the gauss fabricator, which allows me to bypass the gauss cannon limit. Right, I can have more than, what is that, 10? Yeah. Now, one last part of the game, when it comes to the basics, you saw that when I had to defend, I chose what targets take the damage. Now, if I had no defenders, it would be the attacker, in this case the opponent, who would choose, after destroying my defenses, if he had some leftover damage, he would choose what does he want to destroy. He could choose anything behind the front line. So, he could, for example, if he had 10 leftover damage, he could destroy the fabricator. And I would be pretty much screwed, because I paid quite a lot for that, and I wouldn't get even a fraction of the value I talked about back, because right now I got 2 gauss cannons, which is barely more value than what I paid for. Now, when it comes to card collection, or as they're called in Prismata, unit blueprints, the game is far more detailed than Hearthstone, for example. You know, when you open your card collection in Hearthstone and you mouse over some cards, you see the text, but that's all. You have to imagine what, for example, a produced spell from a card is. If you have a card like Elise, which shuffles a package into your deck, you do not know how much mana the package costs, or what does it do when you draw it. What if you open it? What do you get? In here, the sort of encyclopedia is pretty detailed. So, for example, let's pick the Gauss Fabricator again. Right, so what does this unit do? It can be damaged, it dies 8 turns after I deploy it, and at the start of a turn it constructs a Gauss cannon. It costs 12 gold, 4 Gauss seed, and has 10 health. Oh, what's that? I can check what actually a Gauss cannon is, what it produces. It's a unit that can be damaged, and at the start of a turn, it adds 1 attack to my power. Great, great. And you can do that with everything, right? I would say it's mostly available for the blue text, because the blue text symbolizes another unit in your collection, right? But even the words like fragile or start of turn or click, they're either self-explanatory or they're explained. You know, like here you have prompt, and the prompt is explained as blocks immediately. See? It's easy. So the encyclopedia of these cards is pretty well detailed. Alright, here let's have a look. This is more of a complicated description, but you can make out what it actually does. So Grenade Mech. When you buy it, you get free pixies. Now, pixies are a thing on the left. When you click the pixie, you destroy it and you gain +1 attack. Right? And the thing on the right, that's a blast forge, right? So you can basically just get to understand all the cards that you have available, because it's a bit of a shame in my opinion, but you cannot have a look at cards you haven't unlocked yet. So if an opponent of yours plays them, you will have to get to know them on the go. You cannot prepare for that. At least so it seems. I haven't checked online if there is like a unit blueprint complete collection where you can take a look at the cards, But some of those seem pretty threatening, and I would really want to know ahead of time what do they actually do before I get face rolled, or face stomped, sorry, face stomped by them. But that's about it. The unit collection is pretty wide and pretty detailed. It's great. Although, as mentioned, I wouldn't mind if I could browse through all of the cards. Although, this way you know what you have unlocked and what is there still to unlock. And I think you unlock them linearly, in a linear way. So, next thing I unlock will be this, then this, then this, and this, and this. I might be wrong, but I think that's how it goes. And last two things are, the game's soundtrack is pretty nice. It's calm, it's great to listen to. It's really good. And the absolutely last thing is that the options menu is quite detailed. A lot of options available. Really a lot. Like a ton for a card game. You even have key bindings. I know some of them are in Hearthstone, but if you really want to get into the game, you can just, you know, get to know the key bindings and you can edit them and whatever. You also have notifications. Like, for example, you can disable private messages that are headed your way. If you want to, for example, stream and you don't want to have any accidents or someone typing things that you could get banned for or whatever, you can just disable whispering, right? You can do that. Or you can enable it for a current session if you know no one's gonna try and do that to you. And you also have streaming options, which basically you can, well, it's self-explanatory. It prevents game units from appearing behind face cams or overlays, right? They thought the options menu through. They really did. This whole game is pretty well thought through, and that's where I... whatever, I already said that. It's a great game. If you don't like randomness, RNG, drawing cards every turn, none of that, this game could be perfect for you. But I fail short when it comes to planning, so I'll go back to... they're not worse, but I'll go back to other randomness including games, because I suppose chaos and salt is where I reign. Not in a game where you have absolute control over everything on your side of the board, which this game allows you to do. Anyway, that's about it for my, I wouldn't say review, but more of like a look into the game of Prismata. And I'll see you next time when I get offered something on Keymailer, because I don't know, when it comes to Keymailer, I'd rather want to do these one-off videos per every game, unless something hooks me, which this game sadly did not, but it has a lot of potential, and it costs 23 euros on Steam. I think paying 23 euros as opposed to, and I mean, paying 23 euros and having access to full card collection once you unlock it through your levels, you know, through playing matches, etc., is far more fair than having a free-to-play game, but actually not getting some cards you want to get ever. In Hearthstone, there are still some cards I would want to get since the day I downloaded it, installed it, and played my first match, and I still don't have them. I can craft them, but I could use the dust on something else, because there's a new expansion. There's an upcoming expansion, okay? So, you know, I think 23 euros is far more fair than if you actually don't pay, but then it's like random, like, oh hey, you want this card? You're not gonna get it this time, but tune in next time, maybe you will. There are some I absolutely last thing, there are also some daily rewards for winning in one of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 modes, right? And you get 3 daily rewards, not just one, and I imagine those refresh every day. But I'm so bad at this game that I haven't managed to defeat a single bot. Only the campaign, and the campaign was great. So my verdict is, game's good, has a lot of potential. You can even watch games live, you can watch streams, etc. But I just, you know, I need more randomness. I can't plan, because look at this. I struggle just to build a few blast forges, and these guys are blasting it. See how fast they're playing? It's like, really? So you can watch these matches and you can like get to know the game better if this is your speed, because this is way too fast for me, right? So, but anyway, game's good, has potential, and if you're looking for a game which doesn't have randomness, good on you. This is probably great. And that's all from me, and I'll see you next time. If you're not a regular viewer, if you are, I'll see you in a Warcraft video very soon.